guidance that had this philosophy, that improving the federal hiring experience for applicants, for hiring managers, and for HR results in not only a better experience for everyone enjoys it more, better outcomes so that we get the right talent that we need in, better employee experience, and better results to the American people.
Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group. Sustaining the PMA's success as President Biden's term comes to an end. OMB's Loren DeJonge Schulman discusses the administration's accomplishments in CX, hiring, cyber, and more. It's Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you'll hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. Here are today's top headlines. A new bipartisan bill would extend the life of a council of the government's top data officials and require that body to look at improving data management practices for artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. The Modernizing Data Practices to Improve Government Act was introduced last week by Senators Gary Peters and Todd Young and announced on Monday. That legislation would specifically renew the Chief Data Officers Council, which is set to expire in 2025, for 7 years, and add new requirements for several AI-related actions. Under the bill, new actions would include reporting to Congress on recommendations and best practices for data management when it comes to adopting emerging technologies and AI, reporting to Congress on recommendations to clarify and enhance the roles of federal CDOs on data and AI, and appointing a representative chief AI officer to the panel. The CDO Council and the requirement for agencies to have CDOs in the first place was established in 2018 as part of the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act before the current boom in popularity of AI. The newly proposed legislation comes amid an increased focus on data as the foundational building blocks for new and innovative AI solutions. In other news, federal agency direct hire authorities for STEM, cybersecurity, and acquisition positions have been extended through the end of 2028, the Office of Personnel Management said in a memo released on Monday. OPM had previously signed off on direct hire authorities for those positions on October 11th of 2018 and again on September 29th of 2023. In the new memo issued Monday, OPM Acting Director Rob Schreiber said the new direct hiring authority window will be open through December 31st of 2028, or until the personnel agency terminates the authority, whichever occurs first. Government roles in STEM, cybersecurity, and acquisition are eligible for direct hiring authorities because they are deemed by agencies to be critical hiring needs, or it has been determined that there is a severe shortage of candidates for those jobs. The OPM memo notes that under direct hire authorities, agencies are allowed to appoint individuals to positions that fall under those categories without regard to various government provisions on competitive service. Last December, OPM said it would permit federal agencies to use direct hire authorities and temporary accepted service appointments to fulfill requirements laid out in President Joe Biden's executive order on artificial intelligence. The AI positions covered by that OPM memo were for IT specialists, AI computer engineers, AI computer scientists, and management and program analysts. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, visit fedscoop.com. The Biden administration is coming to a close. As the president's term nears its end, what better way to take stock of the last 4 years than to reflect on some of the top goals from the president's management agenda and what's been accomplished? Loren DeJonge Schulman is Associate Director for Performance and Personnel Management at the Office of Management and Budget, and she joins me now to talk PMA progress in areas like customer experience, hiring, and cybersecurity, and how the White House hopes to sustain that progress as a new administration is set to take over next January. Loren, so glad that you could join me on the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to get into some of the improvements made over the course of the Biden administration with the president's management agenda and everything that's kind of falls under that in your role. But, I think a good place to start our conversation is with a bit of news, or sort of news. It's came out a couple weeks ago, but the recent federal hiring experience memo that OMB sent out. And, let's start there. And, we wrote about it on FedScoop, but I'd love it if you could help break it down a little bit more for listeners about, what OMB and the federal government, the White House wants to do to improve federal hiring experience, what that guidance aims to do, and what some of the key takeaways will be for federal agencies.
Absolutely. So this is a fantastic both culmination and foundation of all the work that we've done in the President's Management Agenda on the federal workforce. And so we worked in partnership with our friends at the Office of Personnel Management to pull together a memo that focused on a guidance that had this philosophy, that improving the federal hiring experience for applicants, for hiring managers, and for HR results in not only a better experience for everyone enjoys it more, better outcomes so that we get the right talent that we need in, better employee experience, and better results to the American people. So doing this seems like a no-brainer. The specifics of it are all things that are in the memo, are all things that agencies have the authority, the tools and resources to do now. Many of them are new, but many of them have been promising practices for a long time. It's a fantastic nudge to all our partners in federal agencies of, you have the power to make this not only something that is streamlined, but something that gets you incredible talent who is excited to be here. And the memo takes the approach of going through exactly what I outlined, of first taking a strategic approach to hiring. What is the talent we need, not just right now to backfill somebody who left last week, but over the next 5 years? A strategic approach that looks at resources, needs, challenges, opportunities, and then goes through each of those core stakeholders, the applicant, there are millions of people who raise their hand that want to serve every year, the hiring manager, and we hire over 300,000 people into the federal government annually. So those hiring managers are incredible talent scouts for us, and they are making a huge difference in not only today's work, but the work in 20 years. And the HR team that are the ones that are really facilitating the toolkits that get us better talent faster, with more transparency, with better understanding of when they're going to be able to onboard and move forward with their role, and better ability to collaborate with one another and really make use of that incredible scale and volume of talent. So we were really excited to get it out, but the work doesn't stop there. We will be working very closely with our friends at OPM and federal agencies to make sure that all of those elements are things that are not just something that you can do, but become the common practice, and we can improve on them.
Yeah, and just on this note, and we'll get on to some other things here shortly, but how do you know this is successful? What's going to kind of be that key indicator, a year down the line or however far in the future that that this memo made the impact that you were shooting for?
Absolutely. And this is one of the core things I really loved about it, is that we wanted to hold ourselves accountable to, are we actually doing the work, and is it having the impact that we want? And we're doing that by setting up a set of core metrics around when, as an example, if you or I applied to the federal government, at some point in time, there would be a survey or a number of surveys that just asked us about our experience in some way. That applicant experience is an incredibly strong indicator to how good of a hiring mechanism was that. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the hiring manager experience. We survey them as well in terms of understanding how was the process for you, but also how was the outcome for you in terms of the talent. And then over the longer term, we want to get a better sense of the tools that we're offering here, whether that be pooled hiring, skills-based assessments, use of agency talent pools, communication with agencies. First of all, are agencies actually using them? Because they are, in some cases, new practices for them. And second of all, as we look over time, is it having that streamlined effect and that impact on those surveys that we assume it does? Based on the pilots we've done, we are pretty persuaded that that's what's going to be the outcome. We want to regularly hold ourselves accountable at President's Management Council meetings every quarter to see where are we on this? Is it doing what we thought it was going to do? If not, how can we improve, and how can we improve the user experience at all of these levels?
So I mean, federal hiring, the workforce is a huge part of the president's management agenda. There's so much under the president's management agenda, and it's a good time to talk about the president's management agenda because we're nearing the end of the president's term. Obviously, there will be some new administration coming in, whether that's a Harris or a Trump administration in 2025. So I'd love to look back, again, now that we're kind of looking at the culmination of these 4 years and that PMA, how's the administration fared in accomplishing some of those performance goals broadly? And then I think we can get into some of the more nitty gritty that the listeners care about.
Absolutely. So I talk about it all the time, but just to recap for everyone who doesn't live and breathe PMA, the three pillars of the PMA are one that I just talked about, strengthening, empowering the federal workforce. The second is delivering excellent federal customer experience. And the last is managing the business of government. Here's why those matter. Those are all the critical ingredients for a healthy democracy that can deliver and a government that can build trust in the American people. The way that we bring in talent, how we listen to and change based on the feedback of the American people and how we deliver the services they are qualified for, and how we either deliver assistance or procure services or procure pencils to computers to anything else, and spend the money that we are, spend taxpayer money on this. How we do it matters as much as that bang for the buck element. So there's a huge amount of work that goes on every day in this, both in my team and teams across agencies and everywhere across the federal space. And the whole point of it was to have not just like impact on a nice dashboard, which I love dashboards, but impact on Americans. And we had a great event on this, I guess it was last month, since it's August now, last July, that told three major stories of impact, and there's lots of other ones. One major story was on how we're trying to increase pathways into public service through the Pathways program, aptly named, and the incredible success that we've had there. The second was on IRS's amazing pilot on direct file that allows free tax filing that was incredibly successful this year, is now permanent and expanding to other states. And the last was on how government buys, how we acquire things, how we procure, that is not only the best bang for our buck, but the best outcomes for America. Those stories were not only incredibly moving in terms of the impact that they are able to have on Americans, but in the way the storytellers were trying to help replicate or trying to offer lessons and offer the ability for others to take that and replicate it across government. So it's not just one place we have these successes, but it's any agency that can pick up these models and move it. And that is just the true measure of accomplishment, is not only the outcomes that we're trying to show and tell all the time, but that this will live on without me being here or without me talking about this PMA for years, decades to come, and change that from to of how government works, how it delivers, and how we live up to President Biden's commitment at the very beginning of the administration of showing that democracy can deliver. So it's a big goal, but one that we were incredibly excited to do as part of this PMA.
Yeah, and I think we'll get a bit more into that. Democracy can deliver and that sort of trust in government momentarily. But you mentioned direct file, and I'm not going to ask you specifically about direct file, but I think it's a good example of the intersection of customer experience and IT and really delivering for the American public in meeting them where they are. So, tell me more about that CX. You mentioned that's one of the three prongs of that PMA. And notably in the federal IT community, it's been a huge thing focused on in recent years. There's been the CX executive order and OMB guidance on 21st century idea. So tell me more about examples of progress in that space and why it's so important to this administration.
Absolutely. So one of the key facets of the customer experience work that we do is making it easier, more equitable, more accessible for Americans to get access to the information, the services, and the benefits that they deserve, that they are eligible for, and that in many cases only government can provide. If government is the only place or the most reliable place, they are able to get information on Medicare benefits or on a hurricane threat or on disaster relief. We need to work as hard as we can to make sure that we are not only communicating that well, but they were making it as simple and streamlined as possible for Americans to understand where they fit into that picture and get access to it. So the work, there's so many stories I get to tell, but I want to highlight some work that my colleagues in the CIO office are doing around the 21st Century IDEA Act and the implementation that has come since then. So the first thing we needed to do was look at the huge amount of information that the federal government conveys in lots of different places. We have thousands and thousands of websites across the federal enterprise. We had to measure that. We have worked with agencies to measure and inventory over 10,000. We have worked with our friends at GSA to expand some of our automated scanning so that we have a better understanding of where are people on the spectrum of easy to access versus you're showing information from 20 years ago. Since we built out that measurement capacity, we have seen a lot of progress. People are so excited to be able to make the changes here. Some examples, over 900 websites have made a lot of progress on mobile usability. There's many Americans who only access the internet on their phone. Over 600 have made a ton of improvement on search engine optimization, because so often we don't know what to look for. I mean, I've worked in government for years, and you don't necessarily know what exactly I'm trying to find in terms of where do I apply for this thing or where do I get this information. We need to have search engine optimization to be able to tell that story easily and simply. We've got nearly 1,000 websites that are trying to build their digital analytics program, so we know not only what we're experimenting with, but is it working? And over 200 that are working with us on the US web design systems. They're taking the best practices we have and putting them on the story to tell the American people. And just as a couple of quick anecdotes I can offer on this, one, our friends at VA have done amazing work in this space. They have expanded their mobile app features. They have improved accessibility so that people, veterans who are trying to get access to services, can find them all in one place, so that blind veterans can read their VA benefits decision letters on the app using assistive technology, and that they have a one-stop shop where they're doing this. Our friends at NASA consolidated their web presence, launch a brand new, extremely cool nasa.gov, science.nasa.gov, and a few others, so that everyone who is such a space nerd like me can go to a single space to do this instead of like lots of places to look for it. I mentioned direct file. They worked really hard to revise how they are communicating with first-time tax filers, people who have never done this before, so that they can best understand this process. It's less scary, it's more approachable. That drew over 100 million views to the work that they did. And last but not least, our friends at FEMA have launched a redesigned homepage and registration process. It makes it a lot easier for people to find really critical information about emergencies, disaster relief, access to benefits, and things that Americans need and at times that are most scary and stressful to them. So it's not just like ones and zeros on a page, so that's important. It's also about taking a compassionate, iterative, and engaging approach that takes our mission seriously in communicating with government.
And I think to kind of even further extrapolate it and tying it back to that trust in government, that you mentioned FEMA, those are people who are dealing with, disaster and some of the worst times of their life, veterans who need benefits and are very vulnerable population, people filing their taxes, or even, as you mentioned, NASA, if people are just interested in, what our space agency is doing. Those are important things. And if that customer experience isn't there, that trust may be degraded. But I did notice that in the recent PMA quarterly update, and you guys release a quarterly update every quarter, as the name states, but it seems that there's a new trust in major government service providers dashboard, and that that's measuring that trust, and it seems that is trending in the right direction. So tell me more about what the goal of that is, and sort of what the early takeaways are in measuring that.
Absolutely. So just kind of reiterate something I said earlier. One of the whole objectives of the PMA is to help build the trust of the American people in the ability of their government to deliver for them. Okay, and that's not just like a nice to have. It is incredibly important when government is offering information on public health, on disaster, that is offering access to benefits. When Americans have more trust in their government, they're more likely to be able to access things that they're eligible for, to listen and respond to public health, to guidance that only government is able to offer, and also to create a platform for government to build and reform and improve as much as they need to. Trust it's not just like, do I like government or not? It's really a foundation to the work that we do every day. So we wanted to make sure that we are actively measuring how much Americans have trust in specific services and the agencies that provide them. And what are those factors that are contributing to that? Or where is it that we're actually harming the trust in some way? So all of our what we call high impact service providers, and that's anyone from the IRS to Veterans Affairs, to Medicaid, Medicare, all the way to making reservations on recreation.gov. They all do surveys or other sorts of engagements with customers and Americans to understand, how was your experience? What could we do better at? Why, or what is it that you liked about it? What drove the and also keep a key set of questions around trust. We then wanted to be able to show and tell that, so that Americans see how all of them are performing, but also so that we can all collaboratively learn what's working and what's not. If you go into the trust dashboard, there's some really great functionality there. You can look at, for example, service providers who offer health or health-related functions, and that might be Medicaid, Medicare, it might be Indian Health Service, and so on. You can look at all of the survey data related to those and see what's driving it in those different functions, so that they can all learn from one another. And then also we as customers can all learn in terms of like how and where they're improving. It is an incredible space for data nerds to go get really excited, but it's also an amazing space for us to be able to show that transparent story of, not only do we want to make sure we're building trust, we want to show you how we're committed to improving over time, and be able to benchmark across all agencies, but specific functions, in order to like show that we are incredibly committed to improving this and to better understanding how it is Americans experience the services that they are eligible for every day.
And I'll cherry pick another example of, in the 21st century digital space, a trust in your government is trusting that your information and your privacy and data is secure. And
Absolutely.
cybersecurity is something that performance.gov and OMB are measuring as well. And it looks like there's been a steady increase, and there's been a lot of positive improvement there across federal agencies. So I'm curious, what do you attribute that to, and what can be done to get those who are lagging to catch up with their peers?
Yep, that's a great question. So first, I just want to note that my colleagues in OFCIO, the CIO office, are the experts here, but I'll tell the part of the story that I can feel confident about. And one comes back to the point I made earlier, that measurement and transparency make a difference. Working with agencies to help understand what we're measuring and why is a first order step. Working with them to understand how to improve and what investments, changes, reforms make a difference in that measurement is incredibly important, which is what my performance team does every day. And being really clear about not only those public metrics, but those sort of interim measures that get you from A to B to, well, actually it would probably be C to B to A in terms of grading, so that they can take best use of everything that their peers have done across the board, and then all the learnings that we have had. As you say, agencies have made a ton of progress in this space, and it's really impressive to be able to see that in the last fiscal year, half of all CFO Act agencies had a score of 90 or greater, and that OMBs were working closely with this entire community to better understand those grades, and also to better understand the expectations of what moves the needle for them, not in terms of outcomes, but also the measurements that we care about. There's going to be a lot, a lot more to follow in this space in the coming year. Our colleagues in OFCIO and across agencies do amazing work here. But I think that transparency, that measurement, and understanding why those measures are important are a key ingredient to any initiative, and in particular to this space.
So let's close with a question I'm sure you're thinking a lot about, and you probably get a lot now that, again, we're at the end of this 4-year term, and it's not going to be continuation of the Biden administration. There's going to be a new administration. There's a finality to it. So does your job change at all, or are you thinking differently in terms of advocating for continuity of all this work that's been done over recent years? And how are you working to ensure that, that progress that's made is something that the next administration is going to pick up and continue?
It's a great question, and you're right. It's on everyone's minds. And I think that we have been, I have had the privilege to serve in the Biden-Harris administration for about 1.5 years now. But my colleagues who've been here for longer, my career colleagues, as well as our fellow appointees, have been from day one thinking not just about the words of the policy that we put out, but the institutionalization and implementation. The reading division of the PMA is, for nerdy folks like me, incredibly inspiring and exciting. I also know that that is maybe 1% or 0.1% of the work, and our success is not necessarily in having agencies across the board or federal workers know the words of the PMA, but to feel the impact and have, in many cases, the work that we have piloted across the federal agency go from a pilot to something that is approachable for everyone to something that is a complete norm that you didn't even realize was a pilot a few years ago. It has just become the way we do business because it has better outcomes for them and better outcomes for the American people. So I wake up every morning thinking about, to your point, institutionalization. Where is it that we can make it possible and remove barriers to implement all the incredible practices we've done in this PMA, from how we buy, how we deliver financial assistance, how we tell our stories to the American people, and how we hire. And we've had incredible successes there, but I as we say all the time in this office, we are running through the tape to make sure that institutionalization is something that we are all focused on.
And just a final, I guess, opportunity to plug anything in that regard, as you're thinking about institutionalizing things, are there any other, areas of performance that we didn't touch on that are important that, you think listeners should think about as we kind of go through the next, I guess it's 6-7 months of this administration?
Absolutely. So one of the first things that I was lucky to be a part of when I came on board was helping launch OMB guidance around organizational health and organizational performance. It's a long guidance memo, but let me sum up the point of this. We learned a tremendous amount about the federal government and its ability to perform and deliver during the pandemic. It was an incredibly tough time. We also recognized the benefits of the flexibilities that we were able to offer in some cases, but also recognized the importance of investing in the long-term institutional health of our government. That is what allowed us to do so many, frankly, miracles during the pandemic. And investing in that, measuring it and understanding it will set us up for success going forward. That linkage between how healthy are our institutions, not only in terms of who we're hiring today, but how we're developing them, the team building that we are doing. Do they have the tools that they need? Do they have the offices and the facilities and the partnerships that they need in order to do their work? Contributes to performance right now, but also will contribute to performance in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. The work that we've done with agencies to help them set up measures that make sense for them, to build routines in, to care about those, and to invest in the changes they need in order to sustain their health over time is something that I think is an incredible legacy of the team that I work on, but also an incredible legacy of us taking a tough moment in the federal space and making best use of the incredible lessons that we learned there.
Well, Loren, it's been such a pleasure to speak with you. Again, I think just to sum it all up, and I think you said it well, but these are the things that really move the needle on democracy and trust in government and the ability for Americans to get the services they need. So while these things aren't often, the things getting the headlines they deserve, they're so crucially important. So the opportunity to hear from you and to break it down has been quite a pleasure and really helpful. So very, very, very much appreciate the time.
It's been great to chat with you. I can always nerd out about the PMA, so thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks. For more on the president's management agenda, visit fedscoop.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Daily Scoop podcast, available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people to find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back tomorrow with more top headlines. Until then, I'm your host, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for listening.